And I needed to scream, and I needed to shout, and I needed to cathartic, and I needed to shout at the world and the universe. And dynamic meditation gave me that opening to do it. Bioenergetics also did as well, I have to say. Anyway, Ashram then told us about Rajneesh. And Paul said, I had the 2 babies by now. And Paul said, look, I got to go and meet him. And I said, okay, you go. And I was delighted for him to go because we'd just moved into a new premises, and he was a pain in the ass when I was trying to do the practical things of getting painters and decorators and so on. So I said, you go to Bombay and I'll stay here and get this lot together. And he'd been gone, I think, at the most 10 days, a week, 10 days. And he called me and he said, you've got to come. This is everything we've been looking for. This is what we've been searching for. And we had always been searching. And part of having Quaesitor was bringing new people over. New teachers, new gurus, new whatever, new techniques, new ideas, new ways of approaching psychotherapy, new ways of being humanistic, whatever it was. And so I said, okay, I'll come. So I downed tools and left all the people painting and decorating and picked up my 2 kids and off I went to Bombay. And there I got off the flight in the morning with my 2 children, and they had been awake. One of them had been awake the whole way to India. I remember that really clearly. There was one of them screaming the whole way, as children do, you know, and one sleeping. So they were quite fresh when they got there because they'd both slept half the journey. I hadn't slept at all. And I arrived in Bombay and I was taken to Bhagwan's house, flat, and taken into his room immediately from the plane. And I think Paul had rushed me in to have a shower first. And because Bhagwan always liked you to shower and be clean. So I went in to see him, and the children fell asleep promptly. We got in there, and he said, you see these little children, they know exactly how to be. And I thought, well, they know how to be because they haven't been awake for a whole bloody trip on a jet plane. Anyway, that was Rajneesh, and I met him, and I was, a part of me very held back because I saw that my husband, Paul, was besotted with him. And I thought to myself, on some level, this is dangerous for me. I knew I'd lost him. Now, I never really had him, of course, because we don't have people in that way. But I'd always managed through all of his various affairs and sexual enterprises, I'd managed somehow, through a mixture of sheer force and breaking windows and breaking doors and guilt and manipulation and guilt, a lot of guilt, to keep him from going off and keep him as much as I could by my side with these 2 children. And then Rajneesh, Bhagwan said to him, you know, you must be with a lot of women, Paul. Tirtha, he was called then. Tirtha, you must be with a lot of women. And I heard him say this, and I thought, oh, shit. And he was perfectly right. That was the way for Paul to go. But that was the beginning of our breaking up. And then I came back. We both came back. We were there. I was there for a few weeks. And in that time I was there, I was very impressed with this man. He was quite an amazing man. And he said, look, go back, sell up Quaesitor, finish off whatever you have to do and come and live here. And so we said, yeah, great. So we came back and we found a guy called David Blagden, actually, nice man, who died in a boating accident. He was the first guy ever to cross the Atlantic in the smallest ever boat ever. Okay. David. And anyway, he took over Quaesitor, and he subsequently went out on a boat and drowned, actually. And we went back to live in India. So we left Quaesitor behind, and it became even more successful, I think, when we had left. And went out to live there. And we lived, first of all, in Bombay, where Bhagwan still was. And after a short time, a few months or so, I came back because it was the kids and prickly heat and all of the things. He sent me back, and that was the end of my marriage to Paul.
So he sent you back to start a meditation centre?
He said, go back and start a meditation. Actually, he didn't say it that time. He just said, go back for a year, because the children are too young, and they were.
Okay,
The heat was overwhelming. There were diarrhea and whatever.
Yeah.
So I went back for a year. I met another man while I was back and set off on another wonderful adventure with another man, which was much better for me. And then went back to Bombay, and Paul was still with all kinds of women. And then we moved, then we moved to Pune. And I went to Pune. And then again, Bhagwan called me in one day and he said, look, I really need somebody to set up a meditation centre in London, and would you go back and do that? And I said, sure, but what about Sham? Because Sham had a meditation centre.
Yes.
And he said, oh, don't you worry about Sham, I'll take care of that. Sham was well pissed off by this, me coming back. I don't know why Rajneesh did it to him, but he did. It was his way of working with Sham. Anyway, I set up this meditation centre, which was called Kalptaru, and which grew and grew and grew and became very successful. And we went from a place in Islington to a place in Camden. And then finally I said to Bhagwan, I want to come and live in India now. And he said, okay. So I went out to live there. And Pune in those days was, again, it was that experience of being able to let go of all of my conditioning. It was so wonderful to be there. There was so much freedom. There was sexual freedom. There was freedom to say whatever you wanted to say. There was a sense of a very deep sense of meditation and of having times in the day when just sitting in the silence was perfect. And there were times when we laughed and laughed. It was the most fun I think I've ever had in my life. And I was put to work. I was working as a psychotherapist in the ashram and running groups there and doing therapy. And then one day I got a call from Bhagwan to say, I'd like you to go back to England again. And I really didn't want to go back, but the name was surrender in those days, so I came back to England.
Was that easy for you, surrender?
No, very difficult for me.
Because I know you were having a good time. It must still be a difficult thing.
But at the same time, it was difficult for me, but there was always a part of me ready for the next adventure.
Yes.
And so it was, wow, okay, let's do this one.
That's the part of you that I was referring to earlier, which is such an admirable quality that even though it's difficult for you, you still open yourself and go for it.
The part of me that doesn't say no to the next adventure is huge. So I came back and I did a big event at the Café Royal, which had about 1,100 people came to it, and we had Bhagwan's pictures all over the London buses, and it was a major breakthrough for his publicity for him.
It got the national papers, didn't it?
It got the national papers,
yeah.
Yes. I won't go into what was said in the national papers, but it got the national papers.
Yeah.
And then I was ready to go back again, because he said, just go and do this event, in fact, at that point. And he said, no, you stay there because I think you have to make a city. It was a bit grandiose. I didn't make a city, but I started another centre called Medina.
Yes.
And at that point, he left India, which was going on unknown to me. He was preparing to leave India, which was one of the reasons he'd sent me back. So I stayed, and I then got Medina together, and Medina was a huge place. And you came there.
Oh, I knew Medina, yeah.
Yes.
I knew Kalptaru as well, actually. Yeah.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Medina was great.
Yeah.
And again, that was enormous fun. I think we really had a great time.
So it was basically 200 people living in a country house as a community, and then people coming to visit most weekends to do workshops and
yes,
therapy
at the
and
weekends
things.
there would be 400 to 500 people there. And we had accommodation for people, and also we ran businesses. We had all kinds of businesses. And we made a lot of money.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we had to send all that money off to Rajneesh Puram, otherwise we'd have been millionaires.
So by this time, Rajneesh had moved from Pune in India
to
Oregon in America, and created his own city there, which needed finance to keep the whole thing running.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we just as soon as we managed to get some money together, we'd have to funnel it off. Yeah. So, but we still managed to keep creating new businesses. I don't know how we did it, but we did. I think we just had an amazing team of people there. Really, very special
people. That's
very special people. And the people who were running it, mostly women, great women that I so enjoyed working with.